China is fighting pollution, finally. Actually, just 1/10 of pollution, but it's a start. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Skylar James, and today I have an update on the carbon allowances market. China has finally launched their domestic cap and trade system, but not all emission trading systems are built equally. Let's clear up the important stuff in this update. Why are experts disappointed by China's plan? Will the plan get better in the future? And how does it affect us as investors? China is by far the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. China's President Xi has vowed that the nation will be fully carbon neutral by 2060, and that the country's carbon emissions will peak by 2030. 9 more years of increases, I guess. Some analysts think the country's carbon emissions could peak before 2030, because they say China has underpromised and over-delivered on environmental issues in the past. Seems to me like they've actually looked the other way on environmental hazards while their citizens choke in smog-filled cities, but to each their own, I guess. The Chinese ETS will immediately become the largest in the world. To me though, it looks like carbon allowances with training wheels. For example, all coal-burning power plants delivering 300 megawatts of power will already be in full compliance of emission standards on the day of the program's launch, without making any changes. Coal-burning mega power plants, these are the biggest polluters. Eventually, they will need to reduce emissions, but as a byproduct of being under the limit of 2021, the coal industry is generating unused allowances that can be theoretically circulated in the ETS at a later time. I say at a later time because this training wheels ETS doesn't even have an auction platform yet, and the carbon allowances that are in circulation currently were just handed out by the Chinese government to the power sector for free. No purchase required. Now, devil's advocate here, let's just say the power plant does go over their government-imposed emission limit. Guess what? They're only looking at a maximum fine of $4,600. That's a drop in the bucket as a part of this toothless approach. And here's a little cherry on top of this bad news sundae. What was originally supposed to be steel producers, chemical companies, and other polluters under the microscope being forced to draw down their pollution output has instead turned into carbon regulations for just the power sector. It represents about 10% of global emissions, but is barely a third of China's total contribution to global carbon. Again, right now, China's ETS is just cap and trade on training wheels. Limited scope, industries already in compliance, minuscule penalties, no auction system, and no cost for businesses to receive initial allowances. But here's the upside. Here's what happens when the training wheels come off. That 10% we just mentioned begins to include more of the 27% of global emissions China is responsible for. It ropes in concrete and steel industries and chemical companies. But if China rushes into this expansion too quickly, emissions will increase and the cap and trade system will fail. For 2 reasons. The first reason, this whole ETS depends on accurate reporting of emissions. As it stands today, the power generators are more equipped, it seems, to report trustworthy numbers. My research suggests this is why the emission limits China has put in place are above the emissions that these industries are already producing. China's taking a calculated approach of getting businesses and industries in the habit of reporting accurate emissions numbers to the state, and is actively trying to discourage firms from lying about their output. That's why the fines are so low. That's why the allowances were free. That's why the emission standards make coal power plants look like electricity producing angels. China needs businesses to report emissions accurately first. Then over time, begin convincing them, these firms, to lower their emissions. If the carbon measures are too strict too early in the process, who's to say the numbers reported by the businesses don't get fudged? It might be easier to lie than to pay a financial penalty or to deal with costly equipment overhauls. In that scenario, emissions would stay high. Check out this great interview I found between the New York Times and a 39-year-old coal miner working in northwest China. When asked about the risk of the coal plant shutting down due to reduce global emissions, he responded, "Because of global warming? I don't think that's possible. I've never heard of that reason." Never heard of it? That's commonplace news for us living in the West, that a coal plant is shut down over emissions and pollution. But how much can China balance pushing forward climate change legislation in a country that is rapidly developing? The economic engine of this development is dependent upon dirty fuels and dirty industries like coal to fuel that growth. And beyond that, these dirty industries not only drive industrial progress, but they supply millions and millions of jobs for borderline impoverished Chinese citizens. China doesn't want to rush into an economic unemployment crisis. Don't mistake me summarizing this as me saying that China's making the right choice. The planet matters. Earth before all else. Rather, what I'm saying is looking at this through the eyes of the Communist Party, through the eyes of the iron fist government, the training wheels approach makes sense for them. Beyond just carbon emissions, think about the calculated moves President Xi has made for his country regarding control of tech companies and publicly traded businesses. First you have Alibaba, then Tencent, then Didi. From our vantage, we're only now seeing these dominoes fall, but they were probably put into action last year. Make no mistake, President Xi is not shooting from the hip, not in tech, not in carbon emissions. In fact, I truly believe China wants an ETS in place. If for no other reason, then it's in the nation's selfish best interest to lessen the impact of climate change. And it gives them additional prestige on the global stage. I just think the leaders in the ruling party are trying to ease off the gas pedal of industrialization slowly and with control. Finally, how does China's involvement affect the global price of carbon? And will we, as holders of the KRBN ETF, benefit from China's ETS coming online? Let's answer the second question first, and be sure to check out my KRBN deep dive video. I think it's the most exhaustive look at that ETF available anywhere. Our KRBN holdings aren't likely to include China allowances in the next couple years, but China's presence in the market is likely to indirectly send the price of carbon higher around the world. There's a few caveats with that, so buckle up and catch these 3 reasons why. The first reason, China seems to be taking special steps to keep speculators and international money out of the carbon pricing system, leaving full control of domestic emissions pricing in the hands of the ruling Communist Party instead. Remember, the country is trying to strike a balance between emission reduction and continued rapid industrialization. China wants to make sure it alone decides when and how that transition occurs. Second reason, this will most likely include a ban on carbon futures contracts within the country. Another reason we aren't likely to see it covered in KRBN in the near future. And the third reason, most carbon allowance investment products today want to see a minimum trading volume in an ETS before offering access to outside investors. Given the lax parameters China is kicking off their ETS with, I'm not sure there'll be enough trading activity in this new market to entice US fund managers to open that can of worms. But hope is not lost. Most experts think that the launch of China's ETS will create a positive price correlation with other ETSs around the world. And hey, maybe we do get exposure to China's markets after a few years of working out the specifics. Check out this price target for price per ton of carbon inside China. Looks a lot like the rest of the world predicts carbon will cost, doesn't it? That familiar up and to the right chart. Investing aside, without a sense of urgency from the nations that add the most carbon emissions to our atmosphere, we as a planet won't reach the target levels needed to prevent an ecological disaster. You can't take it with you, as they say. Investment returns mean nothing if we don't have a planet to live on. So let's summarize this carbon allowance update. China is the biggest carbon emitter in the world. They just brought online the biggest ETS yet. The regulations are a little watered down, but We understand it's because they need to meet several different national goals. And currently, it looks like international speculators won't be allowed in. Even without having access to the Chinese ETS, we could still see the price of carbon rise in other parts of the world where we can get investment exposure. If you got some value out of this, please help a new creator out and tap that carbon neutral like button or engage with the community down below in the comments. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.